Give the call to the member for Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak in support of these appropriation bills, bills that provide for some vital expenditure. These bills also allow me to segue into other facets of my electorate that are supported directly and indirectly through this bill and associated coalition government policy. Ryan is proudly home to the Gallipoli Barracks, the second largest military base in the country. And I am pleased that the Coalition is committed to defence with an $810 million appropriation to the Department of Defence. The Coalition has a long history of supporting and bolstering the Australian Defence Force, and we are increasing defence spending, improving capabilities and providing better support for current and past personnel. The Coalition government is also looking after those younger Australians who suffer from childhood cancer, by committing $10 million to support the establishment of a national research network which focuses on improving childhood cancer survival rates. In fact, it was only late last year that the Turnbull government provided $20 million to the Zero Childhood Cancer Collaboration Network to help improve health outcomes for children with cancer. The aim of the Zero Childhood Initiative is for every child with cancer, up to 1,000 a year, to access the network's cutting-edge technology and collaboration by 2020 to push survival rates for childhood cancer towards 100%. Not only will this initiative change lives, it will save lives. Madam Deputy Speaker, as a government whose welfare mantra is about a hand up, not a hand out, I welcome the funds through these bills that will provide for the expansion of the Department of Human Services fraud prevention and debt recovery capabilities. I acknowledge that this topic is of great contention at present, especially from those opposite who would hand welfare out willy-nilly if they had their way. Members only need to think back to 2009, when the Rudd government's failed stimulus package paid $900 cheques to hundreds of people who were dead. Because, as we know, on the Labor side, the afterlife economy was in dire straits as well. Australians must remember that we, as a government, must ensure that those most vulnerable and in need amongst our community are cared for. To this extent, we must also maximise the welfare dollar. We are a government based on strong economic foundations, which is providing the means for the success of all Australians. We are wealth creators and see fit to do everything in our power to do what is right for each and every Australian. After 12 consecutive quarters of decline, it was encouraging to see new business investment increase for the first time in final 2016 quarter, up almost 2%, results attributed to the Coalition's strong economic policy. To do this is often met with obstruction from those opposite at the direction of their acrobatic leader Bill Shorten, who is better known for his flip-flop trick, saying one thing yet doing another. Each time Labor and the Leader of the Opposition attempts to stymie the successful passage of worthy policy through this House, they are inflicting unknown havoc on hard-working Australians. One needs to look no further than the recent frivolous debate thrown around by those opposite in their blocking the necessary steps only the Coalition is taking to fully fund the NDIS, something that Labor could not and did not do during the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd era. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me highlight some subjects that are closer to my home of the Ryan electorate and in some way will affect all Australians. First, I would like to discuss closing the gap. Let me be clear, there should be bipartisan support for anything that can be done to right the wrongs of yesteryear. Aboriginal policy must be personal, not political. The Prime Minister recently noted that even through the determination of our first Australians to create a better future, with support of successive Commonwealth and state governments and thousands of dedicated Australians seeking to contribute, we are still not making enough progress. During the past month, I, along with my office, have engaged in discussions with Lyndall DeMarco, the ever-enthusiastic CEO of IDEAS. IDEAS, an acronym that possibly has your mind full of ideas, stands for Indigenous Diabetes Eyes and Screening. Lyndall began our conversation eloquently referring to our eyes as being the window to our soul. With this aptly put, Lyndall began to discuss the IDEAS van, an initiative that is closing both the remoteness and health gap for Indigenous Australians. Not many people are aware that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people aged 40 years or more have 6 times the rate of blindness than any other Australian, or that 94% of this vision loss is preventable or treatable. Considering that Australia is home to some of the world's leading optometric and ophthalmic specialists, how can this be? Ideas Van is not just a semi-trailer with basic medical facilities in tow. Rather, it is a mobile and fully equipped ophthalmology, optometry and imaging specialist centre with state-of-the-art diagnostic tools. It is bringing the care most needed by our First Peoples who do not have access to the services that many Australians take for granted. It contains everything you need to diagnose and treat eye problems in diabetics who have suffered visual impairment through diabetic retinopathy and associated complications. On-board telehealth facilities also provide a link to the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane for endocrinology consultations. Supported initially by the Queensland LNP government in 2013, the Ideas Van has travelled more than 186,000 kilometres of regional and remote Queensland. By visiting regional hubs around Queensland every 4 weeks, the Ideas Van allows remote communities regular access to services. Commendably, the Ideas Van is providing vision with considerable support from the private sector and the professional specialists who volunteer their time. However, there is still an underlying operating cost that needs to be funded to continue this visionary service. The Ideas Van realises savings for the government by travelling to patients as opposed to the government subsidising expensive airfares for patients to travel to major centres like Brisbane or Townsville. I'm currently working with Lyndall DeMarco and my ministerial colleagues to discuss potential support for this initiative. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Coalition is supporting science, innovation, research and commercialisation in Australia. My electorate of Ryan is home to many outstanding research facilities and scientific minds, all of whom are benefiting from our commitment to the national innovation and science agenda. Industry, research and development are well and truly established in my electorate, which boasts some of the world's leading discoveries and research. I've said it before in this House, but I'm proud to say it again, that the prestigious University of Queensland ranked 55th in the top universities of the world and the top 10 in commercialisation is in the heart of my electorate. UniQuest, the main commercialisation arm of UQ, is one of the world's most experienced private companies in technology transfer. I congratulate UniQuest as they have had a direct involvement in many of the university's successes, which in turn have led to the betterment of humankind. I was delighted to visit the University of Queensland recently to meet with some of their leading researchers and for a guided tour of the university's state-of-the-art research facilities, including the Institute of Molecular Bioscience. The innovation coming from the University of Queensland never ceases to amaze me. The universal language of science draws the brightest researchers from all over the world. I was intrigued during my visit to the Institute of Molecular Bioscience to find out more about the Queensland Emery Drug Discovery Initiative, QEDI, which aims to translate innovative academic research to clinical development and commercialisation by investing in partnerships with industry. By investing in further development and commercialisation, the university is ensuring that vital research is not being forgotten in the often deep academic abyss. Research like that by Dr. Kate Schroeder, whose breakthroughs in cell biology and molecular medicine are paving the way for cures and treatments for diseases like Parkinson's, described to me by Dr. Schroeder and her colleagues as being the potential silver bullet, they may have the efficacy to treat multiple other diseases. Dr. Schroeder's research focuses on the innate immune system and is leading this field in the world in understanding how immune cells launch healthy inflammation to fight infection and unhealthy inflammation to promote disease. The brilliant minds of those like Dr. Schroeder, Professor Ian Fraser with his HPV vaccine, Professor Marie Smith's old treatment for chronic pain treatment, and Professor Mark Kendall's breakthroughs with nanopatch immunisation technology have placed the University of Queensland on the international map. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me pose a question to the House. How many members here would find it acceptable that residents of suburbs in their electorate also share the same postcode with suburbs more than 130 kilometres away? I dare say that members would be flabbergasted to know that this is a situation thousands of residents in my electorate find themselves. Postcode 4306 is one of Australia Post's largest delivery zones, covering some 53 localities, including Karana Downs, Colo and Mount Crosby in my electorate of Ryan. I have called on Australia Post to review the allocation of unique postcodes for localities which currently share a postcode with geographically separate localities. On many occasions, I have written to the Postal Industry Ombudsman to seek his intervention in this matter. And as of December 2016, I note that the Ombudsman wrote to the Managing Director and CEO of Australia Post to seek action. I am still waiting for their response. It seems the CEO is too busy sledging my colleague, the member for Corangamite, instead of doing his overpaid job. Australian taxpayers have recently shown their dismay at the excessive salary of former Australia Post Ahmed Fahul. But what about the dismay that many of my constituents, affected by often dubbed postcode from hell? These constituents have sought action to remedy this matter for more than 20 years, yet are still no closer to a resolution. We're not talking about an electorate as large or spread out as that of the member for Maranoa. We're discussing a metropolitan seat within 20 kilometres of the Brisbane city. I take this opportunity to again place on the record Ryan electorate constituents' disdain towards Australia Post's continual oversight of this significant issue. It affects 5 federal seats, and 5 federal members are in bipartisan unison that this must improve. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have seen time and time again the ALP plague Australia with poorly formed policy and economic mismanagement akin to an adult with mountains of credit card debt who constantly shifts debt from one card to another. Irresponsible moves by those opposite at the behest of their union puppet masters and Greens allies jeopardise the future of this country. The actions of the Labor Party are comedic to say the least, resembling the antics of the Griswold family from the National Lampoon series, endlessly circling the roundabout trying to exit. This was clearly demonstrated by the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd reckless governments and now by this current cohort, many of the same recycled faces who traverse a familiar, well-worn path. During the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd era, we saw the establishment of the Fair Work Commission, an independent body with full independent powers, and yet Labor has the audacity to try to blame the coalition for stripping workers of their penalty rates. The decision of the Commission is a direct result of the process put in place in 2013 by none other than Bill Shorten, the Leader of the Opposition. Meanwhile, the unions have already done a deal with big business to cut their penalty rates for their workers, and part of the deal is that the business collects the fees for the unions. No longer can they claim to look after the worker. It is no wonder the tree at Barcaldine died. Meanwhile, once again, it is the hard-working mums and dads in small business who are on the receiving end of Labor's attacks and unfair policy. And do not get me started on another of Labor's masterminded policies, the energy-efficient home packages, which saw the pink bats debacle and the deaths of innocent, hard-working Australians. It is one thing to form bad policy, but to implement bad policy and to have Australians die is another. And who is responsible? The Labor government. Madam Deputy Speaker, these bills are integral to ensure the continuity of the government's programs. As a strong coalition government, we are ensuring that Australian taxpayers' money is being spent wisely. Unlike those opposite, we are creating a stronger future for Australians, for their safety, health, education and employment prospects. We are creating the foundations for investment in this country. We are reducing Labor's debt and we are providing for those least able to. I can assure the House that only the Coalition will provide for all Australians. We not only have a plan for today, we have a plan that ensures the longevity and prosperity of the nation into the future. Just like Australians who want to provide for their family, we will continue to provide for all Australians. I commend these bills to the House.